Family means sacrifice, my father said, then he used my money to buy my brother a car. Mom added, some children just need to learn about real family values. Brother smirked, finally someone who understands my needs come first. Sister agreed, some people just don't know how to share properly. Uncle nodded, real family members make sacrifices for each other. I smiled and said, he can pay for your heat this winter. The next day, I turned everything off, heat, electricity, water, internet, and they had no idea why. I'm Whitney, 24, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. You know the type, the one who gets good grades, pays bills on time, and somehow ends up being everyone's personal ATM. But what happened last month finally broke something inside me, and I decided to teach my family a lesson they'll never forget. To understand why this hurts so much, I need to give you some background. My family consists of my parents, Robert and Linda, both 48, my older brother Michael, 26, my younger sister Jessica, 22, and my uncle Tom, 50, who's been living with us since his divorce 3 years ago. We all live in the same house, a 5-bedroom place that my parents bought when I was 10. Here's the thing though, I've been paying most of the household bills for the past 3.5 years. It started innocently enough. After I graduated college at 21 and got my job as a software developer 6 months later, I offered to help with utilities while I saved up for my own place. What began as a temporary arrangement to help the family somehow became permanent. I was covering the electric bill, water, internet, and heating costs, roughly $800 a month total. My parents always had excuses. Dad's hours at the warehouse got cut back. Mom's part-time job at the grocery store barely covered groceries. Michael couldn't find steady work, or rather, wouldn't take jobs he deemed beneath him, and Jessica was in her second year at community college. Uncle Tom was supposedly job hunting but spent most days watching TV and drinking beer. I didn't mind at first. Family helps family, right? Plus, I was making decent money, and it felt good to contribute. But over time, I noticed a pattern. Every time I brought up moving out or mentioned that I needed to save money for my own future, someone would guilt-trip me about abandoning the family or remind me how much they'd sacrificed for me growing up. The real wake-up call came 8 months ago when I discovered that while I was paying $800 a month in utilities, my parents were putting away money each month. Not for emergencies or anything responsible, they were saving for a new car for Michael. Apparently, his 10-year-old Honda wasn't reliable enough for job interviews. I found out about this savings account completely by accident. Mom left her bank statement on the kitchen counter, and I saw transfers of $400 to $500 monthly going into a separate account labeled Michael's Car Fund. When I did the math, I realized they'd been saving money for his car by using my utility payments to free up their own income. Over 3.5 years, I'd paid $33,600 in utilities. They'd saved approximately $31,000 for Michael's car during that same period, money they could save precisely because I was covering their bills. That hurt, but I told myself it was still family. Michael did need reliable transportation, and maybe once he got a better job, things would improve. I swallowed my feelings and kept paying the bills. Then came the breaking point. Last month, I had some major expenses come up. My laptop died, essential for my work, I needed new tires after hitting a pothole, and I had an unexpected medical bill after a minor accident. I was short about $1,200 for the month, which meant I couldn't cover all the utilities. I explained the situation to my family and asked if we could split the bills just for October while I got back on my feet. You'd have thought I'd ask them to donate organs. Dad launched into a lecture about family sacrifice and how real family members step up when times get tough. Mom chimed in with her favorite guilt trip about how they'd sacrificed so much raising 3 kids. Michael actually had the audacity to suggest I pick up a weekend job to cover the shortfall. Jessica rolled her eyes and muttered something about how I was being dramatic. Uncle Tom just nodded along with everything my parents said, adding his own commentary about family values. But here's the kicker, 2 weeks later, Michael came home driving a brand new Honda Civic. Not used, not certified pre-owned. Brand new, with the temporary plates and that new car smell. He was grinning from ear to ear, showing it off like he'd won the lottery. Surprise! Mom announced as the whole family gathered in the driveway. We decided Michael needed a reliable car for his new job opportunities. The car cost $31,000. I know because Michael wouldn't shut up about the features and the monthly payment amount. $31,000 while I was being lectured about family sacrifice and asked to pick up extra work to pay their utilities. I stood there in that driveway, looking at this car that my utility payments had essentially helped buy, and something inside me just snapped. But I didn't explode. I didn't yell or storm off. Instead, I smiled and congratulated Michael on his new car. That night, I did some research. I called the utility companies and discovered something interesting: all the utilities were in my name. When I'd started paying the bills 3 years ago, We'd switched everything over to my name and credit for better rates. The electric, water, gas heating, and internet, all in my name, all paid automatically from my bank account. I started planning. First, I opened a new bank account at a different bank and had my paychecks redirected there. Then I began the process of turning off the automatic payments for all utilities. This took about 2 weeks to fully process, during which time I acted completely normal around my family. I also started looking for apartments and found a perfect one-bedroom place about 20 minutes from work. I put down a deposit and arranged to move in at the end of the month. The best part? My monthly expenses would actually decrease by about $300 compared to what I'd been paying at home, even with rent. During this planning phase, my family continued their usual behavior. Michael drove his new car everywhere, often asking me for gas money until his job situation improved. Jessica started hinting about needing money for spring semester tuition. Uncle Tom mentioned his birthday was coming up and how nice it would be to have a family dinner at that expensive steakhouse downtown. The entitlement was breathtaking. Finally, the day came. It was a cold Thursday in mid-November, perfect timing, really. I'd arranged to take the day off work, telling my boss I had a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. Everyone else was going about their normal routines. Dad and Mom were both at work, Michael was out job hunting, probably at his friend Jake's house playing video games, Jessica was at classes, and Uncle Tom was asleep after his usual late-night drinking session. I spent the morning moving my personal belongings to my new apartment. Not everything, I didn't want them to notice too much was missing. Just clothes, important documents, electronics, and sentimental items. I left furniture and other things that could be replaced. Then came the fun part. I'd done my research the week before, calling each utility company to understand their disconnection policies. The electric and gas companies required 48-hour notice, so I called them on Tuesday. The water department needed 24 hours, so I called them Wednesday morning. The internet company could disconnect same day with account holder authorization. At exactly 2 p.m. on Thursday, I made my final calls to confirm all disconnections were proceeding as scheduled. By 4 p.m., the house that had been warm and connected that morning was completely shut off from the world. I drove back one last time to leave a note. I placed it on the kitchen counter where Mom always left her things. Dear family, as of today, I'm moving out and have disconnected all utilities since they were in my name. Michael's new car fund shows you had $31,000 to spare, so I'm sure you can handle a few utility deposits and monthly bills. Uncle Tom mentioned that real family members make sacrifices for each other, so I'm sure he'll be happy to contribute now. Since Dad says family means sacrifice and Mom believes some children need to learn about real family values, this seems like the perfect learning opportunity for everyone. Don't worry, I'm sure Michael will be happy to help since his needs come first and he finally has reliable transportation to get to a job. Jessica can probably chip in too, since she knows all about sharing properly now. You can reach me at my new number if anyone wants to apologize. Otherwise, enjoy your valuable family lesson about real sacrifice. Love, Whitney Parker. P.S. I called the utility companies earlier this week to arrange disconnection and to ask about deposits for new service. The security deposit for electricity is $400, gas is $300, water is $250, and internet installation runs about $200. I'm sure that's a small price to pay for such important family values. I left my key on top of the note and drove away. The calls started around 6 p.m. First Jessica, panicked because the Wi-Fi wasn't working and she had an online assignment due. Then Mom, confused about why the lights wouldn't turn on. Then Dad, angry and demanding I stop this nonsense immediately. Finally Michael, furious that I'd embarrassed the family and insisting I needed to fix things right away. I didn't answer any of them. But I did listen to the voicemails. Oh, the voicemails were absolutely golden. Jessica's first message was pure panic. Whitney, the internet isn't working and I have a paper due at midnight. I've tried unplugging everything but nothing's working. Can you call me back ASAP? I'm freaking out here. Her second message, 20 minutes later, was more frantic. Whitney, seriously, where are you? The lights aren't working either and my phone is dying. I'm at Starbucks now trying to finish this assignment. What is happening? Mom's messages were a journey through the 5 stages of grief. First came denial. Hi honey, I think there might be some kind of power outage. The electric company probably made a mistake. Can you call them and sort this out? Then confusion. Whitney, I called the electric company and they said service was disconnected at your request. That can't be right. There must be some kind of mix-up. Please call me back. Anger came next. Whitney Marie Thompson, you call me back right now. I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but this is not acceptable. Your family needs you. Dad's approach was more direct and increasingly furious. His first message was a stern command: Whitney, whatever game you're playing, stop it immediately. Come home and fix this nonsense right now. His second message revealed he'd figured out what happened. I know what you did, and it's childish and vindictive. You're punishing your whole family over money. This is not how we raised you. His third message was pure rage. Fine. You want to act like a spoiled brat? Don't bother coming home. But when you realize how foolish you're being, don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms. But Michael's messages were the most entertaining. His first one was classic Michael, entitled and demanding: Whitney, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to fix whatever you did to the utilities immediately. I have places to be tomorrow, and I need to shower and get ready. This is seriously inconvenient. His second message showed he was starting to understand the situation. Okay, I talked to Mom and apparently you shut off all the utilities? What the hell, Whitney? You can't just leave your family without power and heat. This is insane. His third message was where he really showed his true colors. You know what? This is exactly why nobody takes you seriously. You throw a tantrum like a little kid instead of talking about problems like an adult. You're going to feel really stupid when you have to come crawling back and turn everything back on. I saved all these voicemails. Not out of spite, but because I wanted to remember exactly how each family member reacted when faced with consequences for their behavior. Not one of them expressed concern for me or wondered if I was okay. It was all about how my actions affected them. The text messages were equally revealing. Jessica sent a string of increasingly desperate texts about her assignment, her phone dying, and where she was going to sleep. She mentioned she could probably stay with her boyfriend Derek, but his roommates made her uncomfortable. Mom alternated between guilt trips and demands. Dad sent exactly 3 texts: come home now. This is ridiculous. You're no daughter of mine. But Michael's texts were the most telling. He started with demands, moved to insults, and finally landed on threats. His last text of the night read: when you come to your senses and fix this mess, don't expect any gratitude. You've shown your true colors, and I won't forget this. I screenshot that one. It perfectly captured who Michael really was underneath all the family's enabling. Around 10 p.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Whitney? This is Tom. Uncle Tom's voice was slurred, probably from drinking. What the hell did you do to the house? I moved out and disconnected the utilities that were in my name, I said calmly. You can't just do that. We're family. Family that used my money to buy Michael a car while lecturing me about sacrifice. There was a long pause. Look, kid, I know they should have been more upfront about the car thing, but you're being dramatic. Come home and let's work this out. Tom, in 2 years of living in that house, how much money have you contributed to utilities? Another pause. That's not the point, it's exactly the point. You've been living rent-free for 2 years while I paid $800 a month to keep the lights on. Now you want to lecture me about family obligation? I've been looking for work. You've been looking for the perfect job while turning down anything that doesn't meet your standards. There's a difference. He hung up on me. Around midnight, I got one final call of the night from Mom. Whitney, please. We can figure this out in the morning, but Jessica is sleeping in her car because the house is too cold. Your sister is sleeping in her car because of your tantrum. This almost got to me. Almost. But then I remembered that Jessica had a boyfriend with his own apartment, several friends with couches, and parents who could afford a hotel room for one night. Mom, Jessica is sleeping in her car because she's choosing to instead of asking Derek if she can stay over for a few nights while you figure this out. And she's sleeping in her car because you and Dad spent 3.5 years saving money for Michael's car instead of planning for emergencies. We never asked you to pay those bills. You never asked, but you sure didn't object when I offered. And you never mentioned you were using that money to save for Michael's car. We were trying to help him get on his feet. For 3.5 years? Mom, I've been supporting this family for 3.5 years while you secretly saved money for his car. I'm done. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find 37 missed calls and countless text messages. The family had apparently spent the night at a nearby motel, and they were not happy about it. But buried among all the angry messages was one from Jessica that made me pause. Whitney, I'm sorry about what Mom said about family values. You've been carrying us for years and we all know it. I should have said something before. I'm staying at Derek's tonight. Can we talk tomorrow? That message gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, someone in my family was capable of growth. The next day, Uncle Tom tried a different approach. He showed up at my office. How he found out where I worked, I'll never know, and tried to guilt me about leaving them stranded. He actually said the words, "This isn't what family does to each other, Whitney." I looked at him calmly and replied, "You're absolutely right, Tom. Family doesn't use each other as personal ATMs while saving money for cars either. But hey, you've got that new Honda to drive around looking for utility assistance programs. He didn't have much to say after that. The really interesting part came over the next few days as I learned what was happening through my few remaining family contacts, my cousin Amy, who thinks this whole situation is hilarious. Apparently, my family's first instinct wasn't to take responsibility or figure out how to pay the bills themselves. Instead, they spent the entire first day trying to figure out how to manipulate me into coming back. Dad called my boss. Thankfully, my boss thought it was funny and told him I was an adult who could make my own decisions. Mom tried reaching out to my friends to convince me I was having a breakdown. Michael actually posted on social media about how ungrateful I was, which backfired spectacularly when several mutual friends commented asking why a 26-year-old man couldn't pay his own utilities. It wasn't until the second day, when the temperature dropped to near freezing and they realized the heat wasn't coming back on, that reality started to set in. Here's where it gets really good: they couldn't just call and have utilities turned on immediately. Since I'd had them disconnected, rather than just not paying, each company required new service applications, credit checks, and deposits. Michael's credit was terrible from unpaid credit cards and a defaulted student loan. Dad's wasn't much better due to some missed car payments from when his hours were cut. Mom had decent credit but panicked when she saw the deposit amounts. Uncle Tom, despite all his talk about family sacrifice, suddenly discovered he had bad timing with his job search and couldn't contribute to deposits right away. By day 3, they were staying at a motel. By day 4, they were calling distant relatives asking for places to crash. The $31,000 car fund was apparently untouchable because it was earmarked for Michael's transportation needs, except $1,000 of it had already been spent on his car down payment, leaving them with less available cash than they'd expected. This is where the story gets even more satisfying. Jessica was the first to crack. She called me on day 5, actually apologizing and asking if we could talk. When I agreed to meet her for coffee, she broke down and admitted that she'd always felt guilty about the family's treatment of me but was afraid to speak up because she didn't want to become the next target. "I watched them bleed you dry for 3 years, she said, crying into her latte. And I said nothing because it meant they left me alone about money. I'm so sorry, Whitney. I knew it was wrong." Jessica's apology felt genuine. She'd always been the least demanding of my siblings, and I could tell she was truly remorseful. She also revealed some interesting information: the family was splitting up over this crisis. Mom wanted to dip into Michael's car fund to get utilities restored, but Dad refused, saying it would reward my manipulative behavior. Michael was threatening to move out if they touched his money. Uncle Tom was making noises about finding his own place, finally, because he didn't want to deal with the family drama. The best part? Michael's new job opportunities were apparently contingent on him having reliable transportation and professional appearance. Hard to maintain either when you're staying at a Red Roof Inn and showering at the gym. By the end of week 2, the full scope of my family's dysfunction had become crystal clear through my various sources. My cousin Amy had become my primary intelligence gatherer, and she was having the time of her life watching the drama unfold. Amy had always been the black sheep of the extended family, so seeing my parents and Uncle Tom scramble was pure entertainment for her. "You should see the Facebook posts," Amy told me during one of our phone calls. "Your mom keeps posting these passive-aggressive memes about ungrateful children and family loyalty. Meanwhile, your dad is asking everyone for recommendations for affordable electricians because he thinks he can wire around the disconnection somehow." This made me laugh because Dad's electrical knowledge consisted of changing light bulbs and occasionally resetting the circuit breaker. "And Michael," Amy continued, "oh my God, Michael is the best. He posted this long rant about how some people don't understand family responsibility, and about 15 people commented asking why he doesn't have a job at his age. Jenny Martinez straight up asked why a 26-year-old man needed his family to buy him a car. The social media aspect hadn't occurred to me, but it made perfect sense. My family had always been big on Facebook drama, usually ganging up on extended family members who didn't conform to their expectations. Now they were getting a taste of their own medicine. Amy also filled me in on the logistics of their situation. They'd found temporary housing with various relatives and friends, but it was becoming increasingly awkward if the real story came out. Apparently, Uncle Tom had tried to stay with his ex-brother-in-law, but when the full situation was explained, he was politely asked to find other arrangements. "He told everyone you'd had a mental breakdown and abandoned your family," Amy explained. "But when they found out you'd been paying all the utilities for 3 years while they saved money for Michael's car, the sympathy dried up real quick." The extended family's reaction was particularly satisfying. These were people who had watched my family guilt trip and manipulate me for years during family gatherings. They'd seen the pattern of everyone expecting Whitney to pick up the check, Whitney to bring the expensive wine, Whitney to contribute more to group gifts. Now they were finally seeing the full picture. Aunt Carol called me yesterday, Amy said. She wanted to make sure you were okay and said she'd always wondered how you could afford to be so generous on your salary. When I explained about the utilities, she got really quiet and then said, "That poor girl has been supporting grown adults for 3 years. She's Team Whitney now." This support from extended family was unexpected but incredibly validating. For years, I'd felt like I was crazy for resenting the financial burden. Now I had confirmation that rational adults could see how wrong the situation had been. The most interesting development was Jessica's evolution. According to Amy, my sister had initially tried to stay neutral, but staying with Derek's family temporarily had opened her eyes to how normal families actually function. She told me Derek's parents were shocked when she explained the utility situation, Amy reported. His mom apparently said something like, "Wait, your sister was paying all the bills while your parents saved money for your brother's car? That's not family support, that's financial abuse." Financial abuse. I'd never thought of it in those terms, but the label fit. My family had systematically exploited my sense of obligation to extract money from me while hiding their true financial situation. Amy also had details about the family's financial scrambling that I found grimly amusing. Dad had tried to get utilities turned on in his name but discovered that his credit had taken a hit from some missed payments on credit cards. Mom's credit was better, but she was having panic attacks about the deposit amounts. "Your mom called my mom crying about how they might have to downsize," Amy told me. "My mom just said, 'Linda, you have 3 adults living in your house. Maybe it's time they started acting like adults.'" The job search situation was particularly interesting. Michael had suddenly become very motivated to find employment, but his approach was initially still problematic. According to Amy's sources, he was applying for management positions despite having no management experience, and refusing entry-level jobs because they were beneath someone with his potential. He actually told someone he couldn't work retail because he has a college degree, Amy reported. A college degree he got 6 years ago and never used. But as the bills mounted and the family pressure increased, his standards began dropping rapidly. The manufacturing job he eventually took was actually one he'd been offered months earlier but had turned down because it involved shift work. Meanwhile, Uncle Tom's job search had intensified dramatically. He'd gone from being picky about opportunities to applying everywhere, but his 2-year employment gap and alcohol-related issues were creating problems. The family dynamics during this crisis revealed everything I needed to know about their true priorities. Instead of coming together to solve their problems, they were turning on each other. Dad was angry at Mom for not managing the finances better. Mom was angry at Michael for being ungrateful about their sacrifices. Michael was angry at everyone for not supporting him enough. Uncle Tom was angry at the world for his circumstances. None of them were angry at themselves for creating this situation. By the end of week 2, Mom called me directly. "Whitney, honey, I think we need to talk." I agreed to meet her for lunch, curious to see if she'd actually learned anything from this experience. She started with the usual guilt tactics: "We're family, we shouldn't let pride tear us apart, your father is just stubborn but he loves you." When that didn't work, she tried a different approach. "I know we took advantage of your generosity," she admitted. "But you have to understand, we were just trying to help Michael get on his feet. We thought if he had reliable transportation, he could find better work and contribute more to the household." I let her finish before responding. "Whitney, you took $800 a month from me for 3.5 years while secretly saving money for Michael's car. That's $33,600, almost exactly what you spent on his Honda. You literally used my money to buy my brother a car, then lectured me about family sacrifice when I needed help for 1 month." She tried to interrupt, but I continued. "And here's what really bothers me, even now, you're not apologizing for what you did. You're explaining it. You're telling me why you thought it was justified. That tells me you'd do the same thing again in a heartbeat." The conversation didn't go well after that. She accused me of being vindictive and said I was punishing the whole family for her and Dad's mistakes. When I pointed out that Uncle Tom and Michael were adults who could have spoken up or contributed at any point over the past 3.5 years, she said I was being unrealistic about family dynamics. I left that lunch knowing that nothing had really changed in their mindset. Week 3 brought the most interesting development yet. Michael got a job. A real one, at a local manufacturing plant. Apparently, the threat of losing his shiny new car and having to move back in with his girlfriend's parents, who didn't like him, was enough motivation to finally accept work that wasn't his dream job. He didn't call to tell me about the job, but Jessica did during one of our weekly coffee meetings. She also mentioned that he was furious about having to work rotating shifts and complained constantly about how this was all my fault. "He keeps saying you ruined his life," Jessica told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Yes, we'd started having regular sister time, which was actually really nice. "But Whitney, he's making $18 an hour with overtime opportunities. He could have had this job 2 years ago if he'd just been willing to take it. The family dynamics were definitely shifting. Jessica had moved in with Derek's family temporarily while looking for a place with roommates and was working part-time while finishing her third year of community college. Uncle Tom had finally found a room to rent and was working at a convenience store. Mom and Dad were back in the house after dipping into their emergency savings for utility deposits, but they were fighting constantly about money. And Michael? He was still living at home, still driving his Honda, but now actually contributing to household expenses for the first time in his adult life. By week 4, I got the call I'd been expecting: "Dad. Whitney, I think it's time we sat down and talked like adults." We met at a neutral location, a diner halfway between his house and my apartment. He looked tired, older somehow, and I almost felt bad for him. Almost. "I'm not going to apologize for trying to help my son," he started, and I knew this wasn't going to be the conversation I'd hoped for. "But I will admit that we should have been more upfront about the car fund. More upfront. Not we were wrong to deceive you or we shouldn't have used your money. More upfront. Dad, do you understand what you did to me? I understand you're upset about the money, but no, not just the money. Do you understand that you taught me my only value to this family was financial? That my dreams, my goals, my future didn't matter as long as I was paying your bills?" He was quiet for a long moment. "That wasn't our intention. But it was the result. For 3 years, I put my life on hold to support everyone else. I'm 24 years old, and I'd never lived independently because every time I tried to save money or make plans, someone guilt-tripped me about family obligation." We talked for another hour, and while he never quite apologized, I could tell he was starting to understand the magnitude of what had happened. He asked if I'd consider moving back home, and I laughed. "Dad, I love my apartment. I love having my own space. I love not being responsible for everyone else's choices. Why would I give that up? Because we're family?" "Exactly. We're family. That means you should want me to be happy and independent, not trapped in a situation that benefits everyone but me." The conversation ended with him asking if we could work on rebuilding our relationship, and I told him I was open to that, but it would happen on equal terms, not with me as the family ATM. 2 months have passed since the great utility shutdown of 2024, Jessica's name for it, and here's where things stand. Michael is still working at the manufacturing plant and has actually been promoted to a team leader position. He's saving money for his own apartment and, according to Jessica, has started dating a co-worker who doesn't tolerate his previous entitled attitude. He hasn't apologized to me directly, but he did text thanks for the wake-up call last week, which I suppose is progress. Jessica and I have grown closer than we ever were as kids. She's thriving in her new living situation and has become much more independent. She got a scholarship for next year that will cover most of her tuition, and she's proud of earning it herself. Uncle Tom moved out permanently and seems to be doing well on his own. He sends me occasional texts updating me on his life, and he actually thanked me for lighting a fire under everyone's ass. He's been sober for 6 weeks and is talking about enrolling in some job training programs. Mom and Dad are adjusting to their new reality. They're both working more hours to cover the bills I used to pay, and while they complain about it, they're managing. Mom has started a small side business selling crafts online, and Dad picked up some weekend work. They've invited me to Sunday dinner a few times, and while things are still awkward, we're slowly rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The house feels different when I visit. There's less tension somehow, like everyone's more honest about their situation now. No one's pretending that their financial problems are someone else's responsibility. As for me, I'm thriving. My apartment is perfect, small but cozy, and entirely mine. I've been able to save money for the first time in years and am planning a vacation to Europe next summer. I've started dating someone from work who thinks my family story is badass and says it shows I have a strong backbone. I've also learned some valuable lessons about boundaries and self-worth. For years, I confused being needed with being loved, and I let my family take advantage of that confusion. Now I understand that real love doesn't require financial sacrifice, and healthy families want each member to succeed independently. The most surprising outcome has been the number of people who've reached out after hearing my story. Jessica apparently shared it with some friends, and it spread from there. I've had coworkers, friends, and even strangers tell me about similar situations with their families. It seems like there are a lot of people out there who struggle with being the responsible one in dysfunctional family dynamics. Some people think I was too harsh, that I should have had more conversations before taking such drastic action. But here's the thing, I did try talking. For 3 years, I tried setting boundaries, asking for help, and explaining my feelings. I was ignored, manipulated, and guilt-tripped every single time. Sometimes the only way to teach people that their behavior has consequences is to let them experience those consequences directly. Would I do it again? Absolutely. The only thing I would change is that I would have done it sooner. My advice to anyone in a similar situation: your family's financial problems are not your responsibility to solve, especially not at the expense of your own future. Love doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, and anyone who tells you it does is manipulating you. Family means sacrifice, my father said. He was right, but he was wrong about who should be doing the sacrificing. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their irresponsible behavior. Sometimes teaching someone to stand on their own 2 feet means you have to stop carrying them. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. Update: as I'm finishing this story, Michael just texted me asking if I want to grab lunch this weekend. He said he wants to apologize properly and tell me about his promotion. Jessica is getting an award for academic achievement at school and asked if I'd come to the ceremony. Maybe we can be a real family after all, just one where everyone takes care of themselves first, and helps each other from a position of strength rather than dependence. That's the kind of family sacrifice I can get behind.